The next battle of the Civil War of importance and testable on your unit test and benchmark, big test, and EOCT is the Battle of Antietam. Importance for this battle is that we're a year into the war. This battle occurred in September of 1862, and this is the first major victory of the Union or the North during the war. Robert E. Lee, the leader of the Confederate Army, was mostly undefeated so far during the war, and the North really needed a victory. Robert E. Lee was the leader of the Confederacy, the Confederate Army, the Southern Army, and he had dominated multiple Union generals up to this point. Abraham Lincoln had had a difficult time naming and keeping a Union general in place because Robert E. Lee had defeated each and every one that he had chosen to lead the Union Army. And so Lee, feeling confidence, invaded the North for the first time. And so this is really significant when you're talking about the Battle of Antietam. It's the first time that Lee went into the North, and he led the Confederate Army all the way into Maryland, near Washington, D.C. You need to know about the geography of the battle. The battle was fought along a creek, much like Bull Run. This one was known as Antietam Creek. I have pictures that I would like to show you. This is the scene of one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Antietam is known as the bloodiest single day of battle during the Civil War. Over 8,000 soldiers died in a 24-hour period during this battle. This is another scene in the battle that played importance. This is the bridge over the Antietam Creek, and this was where hundreds and thousands of soldiers died fighting for control of this area. This is a modern day picture of one of the battlefields. Throughout the Civil War, you can see that Civil War battles were typically fought over large fields, and this is no exception. This is an older picture of a highly contested area during the Battle of Antietam. You can see the stone wall that the Southern soldiers would fire from behind, and then you can see the trench behind it. This is where their rifles would be reloaded, oftentimes by civilians. Younger boys, older men would duck down inside the trench with boxes of ammunition and keep the Southern soldiers' rifles loaded so they could fire more rapidly. This is another shot of the creek that was highly contested during the Battle of Antietam. This is a rare photograph of the general in charge of the victory at the Battle of Antietam, and his name was George B. McClellan, and he is sitting after the battle with the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. And if you pay close attention, you can see Lincoln's stovetop hat sitting on the table beside him. Lincoln had a contested relationship with George B. McClellan. He thought that George McClellan was a little bit too cautious, and twice during the war, Lincoln fired him as commander of the Union Army because of his cautiousness. The Battle of Antietam, what you need to know about it, it was the first major Union victory. It's the first time that Lee attempted to invade the North. It was fought along Antietam Creek near the city of Sharpsburg. And the final thing that you need to know about the Battle of Antietam was Lincoln was so confident after this battle that the Union was doing better, is that he finally issues the Emancipation Proclamation. This document had three purposes. Lincoln was a very smart man and a very smart president. It had three purposes. First, it freed the slaves in the seceding territories. Notice it did not free the slaves in the border states. It did not free the slaves in the border states. It gave the North a moral purpose to fight the war. Now what this means is prior to the war, a lot of Northerners felt like slaves were property of the Southerners. Even the Supreme Court had backed this up in the Dred Scott case. But here you see that with the emancipation of the slaves by Lincoln, now Northerners are fighting the war to free human beings, free fellow Americans, and so that had been held in bondage. The third reason for the Emancipation Proclamation was to keep England out of the war. Slavery was illegal in England, and if they had entered the war on the side of the Confederacy, which they were close to doing, then they would have looked like the biggest hypocrites in the history of the world. And so the English king chose to keep England out of the war. If England had entered the war, it might have tipped the war in the South's favor, because they would have now had more ships, they would have had more troops, they would have had more money, they would have had more supplies. And the fourth and final reason Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation was it added hundreds and thousands to the Union Army. Hundreds and thousands of ex-slaves, Africans, into the Union Army. And in many ways, many historians believe that this tipped the war in the favor of the Union and helped them to win the war. This concludes the lessons on the lesson on the Battle of Antietam.